denizens of the night. Welcome to another episode of the macabre, the terrifying. Broadcasting live from a thicket of chattering trees, I will be your guide through the witching hours. Tonight, we'll check back in on our outdoorsy protagonist. In the last installment, she broke up with her boyfriend Joe after discovering a passion for hiking. As her interest in hiking deepened, she became aware of a secret, legendary trail called the Whisper Tree Trail. It's claimed that this tree can answer any question you ask of it, and that it may corrupt or destroy some aspect of your life. Chasing a lead, she met up with a collector who has a copy of the guide in which there are directions to the tree. Now, we shall find out what she chooses to do next. This story is part 2 of the Whisper Tree series, written by Kris West. Excerpt from a hiking forum discussion on the Whisper Tree. Names have been removed for protection. Member 1. My friend told me he talked to someone who knew a guy that made the trip to the tree last weekend. Member 2. Bullshit. You're 4 people removed from this. Did not happen at all. Whatever. I trust the guy. Said there wasn't a trail. Was a complete waste of time. Member 3. Where did he get the trail information? He didn't tell me. Nobody ever shares that info with strangers. I wanted to see if he got it the same place I did. I'm sure you didn't go either. I did. It was life-altering. I saw something special. What did you see? My future. I thought about Ralph's request for the entire flight home. While he was adamant that no one should make the trip, he had let me see the passage in the book. Why bother showing me if he felt so strongly against anyone hiking there? It seemed to be a contraindication, but it also seemed to follow his code about everyone knowing history, warts and all. It felt like a test question, and I didn't have the foggiest idea of the answer. When I got home, I decided to dive deeply into personal accounts from people who claimed to have been to the tree. Several dozen were sprinkled throughout the internet, and gathering every story took time. I printed them, read them all 3 times, and then made 3 piles of papers. One pile was for stories that seemed genuine, one for stories that seemed fake, and a pile with elements that seemed to belong to both categories. After that, I kept track of elements that seemed to pop up in each story. Much of what I had already heard and what Ralph shared also showed up in most of the stories. Some whispers can be heard before you arrive at the tree. The tree was in a clearing surrounded by rocks. You could ask the tree a question, and it would whisper an answer into your ear. Those things were present in every story, even the ones that felt fake to me. Some of the more fantastic ideas were that an angel would show up and grant the wish. Others said that a blood sacrifice would be required for the tree. One story said that you needed to sell your soul to the devil to get your wish granted. Another far-fetched idea floated in a few stories was that the wishes granted could force people to do things they wouldn't normally do. All of these were bunk, and I dismissed them out of hand. The maybe pile was an exciting mishmash of details. One was that the whole clearing was in a hidden cave. Another said it was protected by a yeti. Someone said that face in rock was an actual face. Some said it spoke, and that's where the whispers came from. Some said the whispers were voices from all the previous hikers. Some people said they were told what their futures held. Some said they were given horrible premonitions. Some people said their families got hurt by unseen forces. Others said their families' prayers were answered. At the end of my fact-finding mission, I was more informed but still at an impasse. For the next week, my thoughts were dominated by whether or not I should do the hike. Some days I was all in on not doing it. Others I couldn't wait to make the trek. My mind was being pulled apart by two different trains of thought, and I was afraid it would eventually just rip into two. I didn't know what to do. The following Saturday, I was on a pleasant walk on a local trail when I had a crazy thought pop into my head. What if I called my outdoorsy ex Joe and got his opinion? I couldn't say why the hell Joe had come to my mind, but he had, and in many ways it made sense. Granted, it had been a while since I'd seen him, but I was sure he'd take my call. Plus, Joe was the one that got me into this world, so he'd understand where I was coming from. I'd wager he probably had heard about the Whisper Tree too. With a heavy dose of trepidation, I brought up his contact information. I typed out, "Hey, hope you're doing well. Can I ask you a hiking question?" and pressed send. I wasn't sure if he'd respond or even if he had the same number. But almost instantly, my phone pinged back, "Are you serious?" "Yes," I wrote. "It's about the Whisper Tree. Have you ever heard of it?" 2 seconds later, my phone rang. I answered, "I guess you have heard of it." "Of course I have," he said. "But why do you know about it? I thought you hated being outdoors." "Well, after we broke up, you left me," he corrected. "Right, after that, I really got into hiking. I actually have you and your enthusiasm to thank for that, so thanks." "I'm glad to hear our relationship had a lasting legacy for you." "Of course. You're part of my outdoorsy origin story." "Okay," he said. "So why are you asking about the Whisper Tree?" "What do you know about it?" "Well, for starters, it may not be real. They say it's in the first edition of the Higgins Guide, but the company bought all those up." "Actually," I said, "I just saw one. The Whisper Tree Trail is in there." "Wait, what do you mean you just saw one?" "A guy in Oklahoma had a copy. He let me see it and write it down." "Are you fucking joking right now?" "No," I said. "Jesus, hot steppin' Christ." "About the size of it," I said. "Are you going? You have to let me come with you." "I don't know what I'm going to do," I said. "I called for your opinion." "I mean, this is the holy grail of hiking trails. You have to hike it." "I'm thinking about it," I said. "What else do you know?" "I mean, legend has it that you can hear whispers when you get close, and you can ask it a question and get an answer from it, kind of like an oracle from ancient Greece." "Weren't those just delusions brought on by poison gas?" He ignored my comment and continued. "Rumor has it the answers all come true, good or bad." "Have you heard anything bad happening to anyone who's just heard the whispers?" I don't know. That doesn't sound familiar," he said. "I think if you're outside the stones, you should be okay." "What are the stones?" "No one really knows much, except that they're old and aren't a natural rock formation. They had to be placed there by someone." "How did you track down a copy of the book?" Connections through work. It was a hassle, I said. What would you do? I'd go, he said without hesitation. Would you ask a question? No, but I'd do the climb and see the tree. That's a bucket list item. He was right about that. I looked down at the paper in front of me. It really was a miracle I had tracked this down. I would be foolish to not see it through. I sighed. What are you doing next weekend? I have a date planned, but I can break it, he said. This is more important. You know where the trailhead starts? Yeah, it's about an hour north of here. Meet you there? Saturday at 8 in the morning. Make it 7, he said, to get out of the heat. 7 it is. Holy shit, he said. I'm gonna see it. We're gonna see the motherfucking whisper tree. I laughed, and we chatted for a bit before we hung up. I had a date, and I was excited about it. I hadn't gone into this phone call with the expectation that this would be happening, but here we were. I needed to be nudged, and Joe gave me the push I needed. I was committed now. The entire week, I found myself dipping into daydreams about the Whisper Tree hike. What would it look like in person? What about the stones? And how soon out do you hear the whispers? I imagined myself getting to Face in Rock and not seeing the trail. How would I feel? Would we try again? I had to imagine so. Friday night, I had a hard time sleeping. I called Joe to confirm the time, and we ended up sliding into old patterns and talking for longer than I'd like to admit. Was there some flirting? I mean, a little, maybe. I don't know. I had a drink or two, and who could tell? Regardless, I knew we'd be meeting up for the hike and scratching something off our bucket list. I tossed and turned all night. At around 3:30, I woke up from a nightmare where I had fallen off a cliff. I wasn't thrilled with the dream, seeing as I was about to scale up a mountain in a few hours, but I eventually calmed back down and dozed off. When the alarm woke me up for the morning, I was more tired than I wanted to be before a significant hike. Still, I knew the coffee and excitement would propel me forward. I kept the radio off for the drive to the trailhead. I listened to the engine's hum and let my mind focus on the task at hand. I was excited, sure, but also nervous. I felt my palms get sweaty the closer I got to my destination. My thoughts kept circling back to Ralph's final warning to me. I hope you don't do the hike. That man had been beaten up by life. He didn't come out and say it, but I knew he blamed his trek up the mountain as the flashpoint for his sorrow. He changed up there, or rather, his world did. His timeline branched, and the life he thought he'd live slipped through his fingers like sand at the beach. I imagined him now, feeling a twinge as I approached the mountain. He knew I'd come, and for some reason, I thought he'd feel it in his soul. Joe was already waiting for me when I pulled my car into the lot. The look on his face was like a child's on Christmas morning. I found it endearing how glad he was to be going on this hike. I was also delighted to have someone as experienced as I was to go with. This would not be for the faint of heart, and I knew he knew how to handle himself. How long have you been here? I asked, hauling my pack out of the back of my hatchback. Half an hour or so, he said. Jesus, I said. Sorry I made you wait. Not your fault. I woke up early and thought I might as well get there. I was too excited to sleep again. I know the feeling. Do you have the directions? I reached into my pocket and handed them over to his eager hands. He read the words like a monk would read scripture and laughed when he was done. "I can't believe you got this!" "Me either. Should we start?" I looked up at the peak of the mountain and nodded. It was time to go exploring. I felt butterflies in my stomach flutter as I crunched down on the gravel that led to the trail. We had 4 hours until we reached St. Christopher's Cross. St. Christopher's Cross was usually a destination hike, but for us, it was just the first step on this journey. I wondered about the significance of the name and the location of the cross. St. Christopher is the patron saint of travelers, and there was a long history of travelers climbing over these mountains. Often, these travelers would get turned around in the dense forests and steep cliffs. The most infamous case was the Lost Flock of 1803. A radical sect of Christians had decided that they no longer could live in a town they believed to be awash in sin, and set off to start their own commune on the other side of the state. That trip, done on foot, would take them right over this range. This trek is arduous now. It was near impossible then. Dozens of townspeople told them not to go. Things got heated. It led to actual fistfights among family members that stayed and those that left. The mountains were already thought of as a mystical place at that time. Most people, this being 1803 after all, believed savage natives were waiting to kill them. Others thought demons lived in the dark corners of the forest that blanket the mountains. Regardless, none of the believers heeded the advice. They set off in July and never planned to return. Not much is known about where they got turned around, but 33 days later, 4 survivors made their way back to the town. They were barely alive and manic. All they would say was, "The voices told us not to stay, and we disobeyed. We suffered their wrath." No trace of the other people was ever found. That said, I've hiked different trails on this mountain and never had any issues. Despite its tumultuous history, I always come back because the views are stunning. The weather was refreshingly cool in the early morning, and there was always a breeze blowing down from the summit. Joe and I chatted and caught up while we hiked the trail. We didn't see anyone, but that wasn't a surprise. Most people that hike the trail tend to get a later start than us. Besides, I didn't want anyone drafting off us and trying to tag along to the whisper tree. What did surprise me was how easily we fell back into old habits. I had met Joe at an adult co-ed soccer game, and we hit it off immediately. He was fun, very polite, and had a great laugh. Back then, that went a long way with me. We went on a few dates, and the good vibes continued. I had been on some rotten dates before Joe, and he was a refreshing change of pace. When he was happy. When he was upset or feeling down, he was a different person. Joe was also the kind of guy who not only wanted you to share in his passions, but enjoy them as much as he did. His insistence that you share his feelings about whatever, be it a TV show or hobby like hiking, was overwhelming at times. I get the instinct. You want to connect with people on multiple levels, but you can't force those things. They come naturally and in their own time. You can't game a relationship. It works or it doesn't. You can't wish upon a star to make it so. Life wasn't a Disney film. "You ever hike this mountain?" I asked. "I have," he said. "Actually, one of the strangest experiences I've ever had on a hill was here." "Really?" Oh, yeah, he said, readjusting his pack on his shoulders. I was doing an evening solo hike on Two Pine Cone Trail. I kept hearing movement in the trees along the trail during the whole hike. Not surprising, I said. A lot of squirrels there. I agree, but I remember it standing out to me. It seemed like something was either walking with me or running a little ahead. I pulled out my can of bear spray just in case. That stuff has a hell of a kick. Yeah, I wanted to be ready for anything. But while I was on the lookout for bears, I tripped on a branch and wrenched my ankle. Ouch, I said. You don't know the half of it. I dropped and clutched my ankle. It's burning and I know I did some real damage. I mean, the side of my ankle touched the dirt. Jesus, I said, wincing at the thought of his injury. I'm down on the ground, rubbing my ankle like I could Mr. Miyagi the pain away, when I started hearing that movement again. But this wasn't a rabbit or a squirrel. This was something big. Bear? Cougar? Hiker? He paused. I don't know, but everything around me changed. The air felt electric. The sun was quickly dropping behind the mountains, and it was getting darker by the second. Vibe shift? I offered. He ignored me. I was vulnerable and nervous. I wasn't sure how fast I'd be able to run if things went south. Worse, I didn't know what the hell was watching me, but I could feel the eyes on me. I hate that feeling. Whatever was in the brush started slowly moving. It sounded like this creature or whatever was getting ready to attack. Besides the bear spray, I looked down at the branch I tripped over and saw it was pretty hefty. I could club someone if I had to. Maybe they laid out the branch to trap you, I joked. I think someone did, he said, as serious as a heart attack. I know it sounds far-fetched, but I think something meant to do harm to me. I think they followed me from the trailhead, waiting to attack. Truthfully, they won. They laid the trap, I fell into it, and things looked bad. What happened? I asked. A storm rolled in. You went on a mountain hike during a rainstorm? Do you have a death wish? There wasn't rain in the forecast. It just blew in and started pouring. I heard something dash off away from the trail. I stood up and hobbled back to my car. Damn, I said. What do you think it was? I don't know. You did research about the tree. Anything about creatures guarding the trail? Not that I saw, I said, shrugging. You know this mountain is home to multiple mysteries, right? It's an old range, he said. That's to be expected. Old tales pile up higher than these peaks. True, I said. Strange things happen all the time anyway. Also true, I said, nodding. I smiled and added, I mean, we're hiking it together after years apart. Who would have thought that possible a few weeks ago? I did, Joe said. I laughed. Then you should play the lotto. I just felt like the way we left things was off. I had a feeling we'd get a second act, Joe said. A second hike, I corrected. For now, he said confidently. We walked a few more steps in silence. I glanced over and saw Joe was working on a question to ask. I felt I knew what was coming, and it had been something I'd wanted to avoid. Can I ask you a question? He finally asked softly. Sure. Why did you break up with me? I did not want to get into this, but I felt like I'd kinda sorta set myself up for this conversation. There had been flirting recently. We'd also talked and texted a few times during the run-up to the hike. Being with him was like putting on a well-worn hiking boot. I couldn't be too mad that he asked. That didn't mean I had to love it. I think that, when we were together, I felt like we moved too quickly. Like I was smothering you? I smiled. I wasn't going to say that exactly, but maybe a little clingy, maybe? I said, adding, sorry? He sighed. I know. I'm not making excuses, but, I was so excitable back then. When I thought someone connected with me, I wanted to try to forcefully deepen the connection. Stupid, I know, but it's the truth. I scared people off. I've been trying to work on it. That's good, I said, a little impressed with the honesty. I get the desire, though. We all want connection. My therapist said it stems from my childhood. Only child, the incessant need to be accepted by people. Being a theater kid probably fed into that some, too. Oh my God, I forgot about your theater past. What was the show you did? He paused and sighed. Fiddler. I cackled. Oh my God, yes! How did I forget that? Laugh all you want. My drama teacher said I was electric as Tevi. Sunrise, sunset, I sang. Regardless, I've made some important personal strides over the years. I'm different now, Older, wiser. Wiser? I said, cocking my eyebrow up. Than I was at 22? Yes. Valid. Also, sorry about before, if it caused you any issues or anything. No, it was fine. We were young and things just didn't work out. No harm, no foul. He smiled, and I forgot how nice it was. We did have fun when we were together. This hike wasn't just heading towards the Whisper Tree, but into our past. The question I was left asking myself was, would there be a future? Glad to see our breakup didn't spiral your life out of control, he said with a laugh. Likewise, I said. He smiled. It was the push I needed, he said, adding, to find my purpose. That might be the most complimentary thing anyone has ever told me about a breakup. He laughed, and it was lovely. I joined in, and it felt right. It was like putting on an old jacket and finding it still fit. He had changed, that much was clearer. I wasn't looking for anything, but maybe something found me. Thanks for this, he said. You're welcome. Thanks for coming. I wouldn't miss this for the world. Shit, I had doubts you had anything until I saw your paper. My word means nothing? I said jokingly. He blushed. Well, it does, but you know what I mean, right? I did. I liked making him squirm a little bit. Secretly, I thought he liked it too. I was going to respond, but he pointed at something ahead of us. I turned and saw what it was. We had arrived at St. Christopher's Cross. The cross was a favorite landmark for these trails. It had started as two pines growing near each other, but they had grown into one another over time. They formed a natural cross where the trunks merged. Over the years, plenty of people have made a pilgrimage here. Many people left St. Christopher medallions hanging from the branches. So many necklaces were hanging there, it looked like the tree had sprouted a fringe made of cheap jewelry. How's that happen? I asked. It's inoculation, Joe said. What? Inosculation. Happens to trees that grow close to one another, he said, pointing at the merging of the two trunks. They call them gemmels. Who does? Forestry professionals and people who speak Latin, he said. Okay, so how does it happen? These trees grew too close together. When the winds on the mountains started whipping them around, they rubbed trunks until the cambium of both trees... Cambium? The layer under the bark, he clarified. Their cambiums touched and grafted onto each other. The bark under the bark, I said, clarifying. He nodded. Yep, they both shared a trauma, the gusty mountain winds grinding away their bark. It could have easily splintered them and killed two saplings, but that didn't happen. Because of the cambium touching, I said. Well, scientifically, yes, he said. But I think it's fate. They were supposed to be together, and Mother Nature worked her magic. You've hiked enough now to see the miracles of nature, right? He was right. Go outside long enough and in remote places, and you'll see the damnedest things. She works in mysterious ways, I said. Exactly. The trauma those trees went through should have killed them. Instead, it brought them together when they needed it the most. Two became one, he said with a smile. Beautiful, isn't it? It's nice, I said. But more than that, it's the first marker. This is gonna happen, I said, with a smile I could no longer hide. I glanced at Joe and couldn't help but laugh. The moment's significance finally hit him, and he started laughing too. We had hiked for hours and were a step closer to uncovering the mystery of the whisper tree. All our exhaustion drained from us. The thrill of the challenge recharged us. Ready to find the game trail? I asked. I am, he said. We walked to the left of St. Christopher's Cross and off the well-worn path. Our eyes were locked on the ground next to us, looking for the elusive game trail. I didn't think it'd be too close to the actual paths, as animals tend to avoid humans when possible. But the trail couldn't be too far either. Otherwise, both people and animals would fall off the mountain. The higher you climbed, the less land you had to navigate. We moved methodically, looking for this game trail, unaware of what we might find. Would there be predators on this trail? If Joe's previous story told me anything, it was that there was a chance. I wasn't sure what we'd do if a bear, or more likely a bobcat, came bounding towards us, but I had come too far to turn back. I'd go down swinging. Just when I was starting to lose hope that this was all bunk, my eyes caught the telltale signs of a game path. This had to be it. I pointed down, and Joe nodded in agreement. I looked back and couldn't see the trail we had walked up. This had to be it. Ready? I said, readjusting my pack. Let's do it. We pushed past the underbrush and started our walk down the game trail. The wild grass around here was tall, and the path was well hidden. You'd never see it if you didn't know it was there. I imagined small animals walking to and fro, hidden from most predators except birds of prey. You can't escape the eye in the sky. A slight breeze picked up, and the sound of the trees and grass flooded my heart with joy. The word serene filled my thoughts. This whole adventure up to this point had been an exercise in nerve, but this moment in the wild, quite literally off the beaten path, with my hair blowing in clean, cool mountain air, this erased those nerves. It shushed the concerned voices in my head and allowed me to enjoy Mother Nature. But as quickly as it arrived, my serenity vanished when I returned to the phrase, voices in my head. We all have an internal monologue, but somewhere a while back, someone else had crept into my brain. At least, I thought someone had. It sounded like me, but it didn't sound like me, if that makes sense. I wouldn't talk like it was talking, even though the voice was exactly the same.
Nothing is real here.
I swallowed hard and glanced over at Joe. How you feeling? Good so far. You? Good, I lied. No voices or anything? Nope. You? Nope. When do you think the whispers start? He asked. Maybe when we're closer, I said. Or maybe we've been here forever, someone inside my head said. Shut up, I mumbled. What? Nothing, sorry. Verbal diarrhea, you remember that, right? I do, he said. We hiked the next little bit in silence. We were on the lookout for Facin Rock. Once we found that, we'd know if we'd be on our way home or to the Whisper Tree. I hoped we'd get to see the tree, but I was nervous about what it might do to me. To us.
Who comes looking?
It sounded like it came floating in on the breeze. I stopped, and Joe did too. We looked at each other, and without saying anything, I knew he had heard it. Are we close? He asked. I didn't think so. How powerful are these things? I don't know. If Ralph knew, he wasn't talking. Who's Ralph? The guy from Oklahoma. Joe stopped and stared at me in amazement. Was his name Ralph Waters? I was surprised. Yeah, I said. How did you know? He's kinda internet famous, he said. Do I want to know for what? He sued the Higgins Guide publisher years ago. For what? For including the Whisper Tree in their book. What happened? His family died not long after his trip, he said, the wheels in his head spinning. The case was thrown out because it didn't have any merit, but he swore the tree was responsible. I've never heard about that. It was a long time ago, and the company goes out of its way to keep it private. Deep pockets can keep every skeleton crammed into the back of the closet. How did you find out? It makes the rounds online every once in a while. It's considered bullshit by most people. Like the idea of the Whisper Tree itself, I said. Bingo.
One lies, and the other denies.
I heard that and was about to ask Joe, but he didn't respond. Maybe he hadn't heard that one, but I sure as hell did. What did it mean? Who's lying and who's denying? Lying about what? The tree? Who denies?
There will be flames.
Joe heard that one. He looked over at me. You don't have anything flammable on you, do you? Probably, I said. I always keep emergency overnight supplies in my pack. Me too, he said, worried. Maybe we should stop. Why? I mean, we're hearing whispers already. Doesn't this prove the tree is real? Do we really need to see it? Stopping now would be like quitting a marathon at mile 25, I said. I'm gonna go all the way. If you want to bail, I get it. I'll see you back down at the cars. No, he said. I can't leave you alone up here. Something bad happens, I never forgive myself. You sure? I'll be okay, and I'm giving you an out. I'm positive, he said. We're probably fine.
It will get us all.
He gave me a forced smile. Maybe a little less confident in that now. We must be close to Face and Rock, I said.
Not all flames are destructive.
Let's go, I said, grabbing the straps of my pack and walking forward through the brush with a determination I hadn't previously tapped into.
Things are really starting to heat up now. We've got full-blown whispers coming on the breeze, voices speaking in characters' minds, and a whole bunch of people lost forever to the dense woods. Oh, I think Kris is really cooking up something extra good for us in Part 3. Speaking of Part 3, I want to make some guesses about it. As of this recording, I have deliberately not read ahead. I like to go in fresh. Tell me in the comments if I'm off base here. But don't you sense something is off with Joe? Sure, people change and grow. But there's something uncanny about his transformation, and the fact that no one except our MC has seen him in this part. I can't say for sure if he's a manifestation of the Whisper Tree, but something about him has raised my hackles. What do you think? If you enjoyed this story, please check out Kris's book in the link below. Once Part 3 is up, I'll include a link to that at the end so you can jump right in. Please also leave a like on this video and subscribe to hear more stories like this one. Whatever you do, make sure you know which voice in your head is your own. And don't fall asleep.